Hey guys, welcome to Masquerade of Motherhood, or as I like to call it, The Mom Show. I'm your host, Courtney Doyle, and this is a place where I am giving you permission to not have it all together. Welcome back. It's Prayer Tuesday. You know I love Prayer Tuesday, but you know what I love about this particular Prayer Tuesday? Is that it's our birthday. Yes, it was my birthday, so we can celebrate that. I'm happy to celebrate that. But it is also the podcast's second birthday, and today is the 100th episode. Like, what in the world? If you would have asked me 2 years ago, whenever I started this with a dinky little microphone, very little knowledge on how to edit or do any of the things, if in 2 years and 100 episodes later, I would still be doing it, I probably would have been like, I don't know, maybe not. But here I am. And it is not because of me. It is 100% because of what Jesus is doing in the lives of the listeners and of the women that have been willing to say yes. I would like to call myself a pretty creative person. I've always loved creative things. But my creativity hits a roadblock, just like anybody else's. And every time my creativity has hit a wall, God has been like, finally, now let me show you what we're going to do with this podcast. There have been women that have said yes to interviews that I would have never imagined would have said yes to be on my show. There have been women that have gotten on this show and have been more vulnerable and more open than I could have ever asked them to be. Guys, it has been a true blessing for me to be able to be the host of this podcast and for me to witness how this has affected you guys as the listeners. You have been so kind. Each week, here was my deal with God when I started this. God, if it's one person, show me the one, because I don't want to get caught up in numbers of who's listening or anything like that. I just want to continue to do it because you have asked me to do it. You have laid this on my heart, and though it's scary, and though I kind of don't know what I'm doing, I need you to do it. And consistently, every single week, He has sent me at least one person to say, I needed to hear that. Or, man, I can resonate with that girl's story. That is what has continued to encourage me that what we're doing with the Mom Show matters. And I hope that you know it's because you matter, and most importantly, because Jesus matters. And what He does in our lives matters. It doesn't matter what your past looks like. It doesn't matter what you're masking. He will show up, and He will use whatever chaos, whatever mess, whatever brokenness, whatever you may have. He can use that to glorify His kingdom and to increase His kingdom. And moms matter. And so often we forget that when we're in the hustle and bustle of working and parenting and laundry and carpooling and all the things, so often we begin to forget that what we are doing makes a difference. This year, guys, we have interviewed moms with stories that they have touched me and they have blessed me in ways that I cannot even express to you. And I know they've done the same to you because I've heard from you and you've told me. We've unmasked topics like surrender, doubt, shame, guilt, pride, control. We've talked about brokenness and acceptance, being overlooked, being weak, and that question we all have, am I enough? Whenever I was thinking about this episode and the verse that I would like to share for this Prayer Tuesday, I was just like, as I always do, God, just show me the verse that you want me to share. And of course, He never ceases to amaze me. In church this Sunday, one of the verses that was shared, Ephesians 3:20, which is, now to Him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to His power that is at work within us. The pastor said this: if you have everything in your life that you planned, you may have missed out on what God planned. And it made me think about the story of this house that we're living in. And here's why. I would say it was about 20 years ago, post 2005 hurricane. We had lost our home. Now, this is a home we brought all of our babies home to. We absolutely loved it. The kids loved it. The kids still talk about it. We sometimes still drive by the house when we go back to Louisiana to visit. They like to look at it and reminisce about, oh, I did this in that room. And do you remember what we did on the stairs? And remember the backyard? And oh my gosh, we did this or that in the cul-de-sac. And we do it often when we go home. So we had lost the house in the hurricane, and we're bouncing around. Here we are, a family of 7, 2 dogs, young kids. All of our belongings, most of them rather, are in storage, and the rest we have, and we're taking them with us, one house to the next, to the next. Anyway, a house came for sale on 10 acres. We had already decided we actually were not going to go back to the house that we had lost in the hurricane. The plan was to remodel it and to sell it. And this house came available on 10 acres. And man, I wanted it so bad. Scott and I went and looked at it, and I was like, this is my dream. This is my dream, and I want it. And it was not Scott's dream, and he did not want it. And it was in a floodplain. And he was like, look, we have already lost one house in a natural disaster. I'm really not willing to sign us up to be a target for another. But when I tell you, in my young and dumb mindset, I didn't care. I was willing to risk it because we had always dreamed of living on land. This looked like the perfect opportunity. I mean, the stars aligned in my head. It was my plan, and man, it sounded good. Well, the irony of that is that we had some really good friends that had 6 children. They actually lived right across the street from us. They bought that house. And oh my gosh, young me. Oh, like if there is an adult temper tantrum that you can throw, I threw it. I mean, I was glad my friends got it because I was going to get to go benefit from it and enjoy it. But, oh, that spirit of envy inside of me, oh, it was thick and it was rich, and Satan was loving it because poor, pitiful me, right? I wanted that house and I wanted that land. And anyway, we actually just talked about this the other day and just laughed our heads off about the whole thing because, gosh, the things you learn whenever you think you want something and God says, nah, that's not for you. At that time, we actually did not know that an opportunity to move to Texas would come available, and it did. Not even a year after we moved back into the home we remodeled. And it was the best move for us. It was the best move for Scott's business. It was the best move for our children. And it was a really hard move to leave home. But it was needed, and we did it. We probably could not have done that had we committed ourselves to that house on land. But fast forward all of these years, that was probably 2006. Here we are, 2021, and I happen to be out driving around, and I come across a house on some land. And I'm a real estate agent. I, love to look at houses. And so I said, Scott, let's go look. So we went and we looked, and it was not the house for us, but the land was beautiful. But here's what's interesting. I stood in the front yard of that house, and the wind began to blow. And when it did, and it was blowing through the trees, I had this emotional reaction, which I'm a pretty, I don't know what you call it, together person sometimes. I began to cry. And Scott looked at me and he was like, "Are you good?" And I was even taken by surprise. I was like, "I don't know what's going on, but just cry." And I said, "It's just beautiful out here. And there's something about it that's moving me deep in my soul, and I don't understand." Well, I dried my eyes. We went on about our business. That was not the house for us. About a week or so later, I was out in the same area, and I thought, I'm just going to drive by. And I pulled in the driveway of this house, and I began to pray. And I was like, "God, what is it? What are you showing me?" And I left, and as I left and continued to drive down the road, Scott called, and he's like, "Where are you?" I'm headed home. He was waiting on lunch. And I said, "I'm actually looking for a place to turn around. I'm out on this little country road, and I come across an old abandoned church." And I turn down the road and I stop in front of this church, and I'm like, "Oh my goodness, Scott, there's the most beautiful church out here, but it's abandoned. It's been broken into. It's falling apart. This is so sad." And he was like, "Where in the world are you?" And I said, "Well, let me FaceTime you." So I put my husband on FaceTime, and I'm now driving down, and I turn on a road that has houses on it, and they're all on land. And so didn't realize this was back here, and I continue to drive down, and lo and behold, there's another house for sale. So I'm like, "Can we go look at it?" Sure, he's, sweet man. He's up for any of my crazy. So we go and we look at it, and we loved it. It needed a lot of work, but it would work for our family. So we brought a roofer out there. We brought contractors out there. It was built in the 70s. We brought a foundation guy out there. I brought my broker out there. I mean, you name it. We had people come and start giving us bids, because I was like, this is it. This is where God is leading us. And of course we began to pray, and the holidays were coming. And so we said, "Look, we're not making any decisions before Christmas. I can't be moving in the middle of the holidays." At the time, I had a senior in high school, a senior in college, really had no desire to move before Hamilton would start junior high, but I needed to move before Hamilton started junior high. So anyway, the holiday came and went. And after the holiday, the agent calls me and she's like, "Hey, make an offer. She, meaning the homeowner, is ready to move. Go ahead and make an offer." And so we decide to drive down the street one more time. It's beginning to get a little dusk, the sun's setting, and we ride out here, and the plan is to see, are there any children, or is this all older people? Like, who will be here for Hamilton to play with? And we drive down, and we're looking for bikes and really proof of life of children before we make this offer. I had the paperwork ready to go. And as we're driving down the road, there's this little old man, and he's in the road, and he's fighting his trash cans. And so he reminded me very much of my daddy. My daddy had just gone through bladder cancer treatment, and so having a catheter was a regular occurrence for him. And this sweet man had a catheter. So we stopped and offered to help, and he, of course, would not accept our help with his trash cans. And I looked over at his house, and I was like, "Your house is beautiful." Now, mind you, I don't know how it was that I drove down this road so many times to look at the house that was cat-a-corner from him, bring contractors down there. I mean, we had been down there multiple times. We were just driving down sometimes, but I never paid attention to this house. So he tells us, "Yeah, it's my house." And he begins to mentor Scott in telling Scott, "Do you know how to be married for 63 years? Well, you give her what she wants." And that's what I did with this house. He was so proud of his house, and he was more in love with his wife than ever. And you could see it on his sweet face. He would give her the sun and the moon if God would let him reach it and package it up and give it to her as a present. He began to tell us all about what he had done in this house for her. Well, after about an hour of talking, he says, you should drive down my driveway and see the yard, see the pool, see the shop. He just wanted to show us all the things. And so we said, well, would you like a ride? And sure enough, he hops in our car and we drive him down his driveway. So we get to the end of the driveway. He's telling us all about it. His sweet little wife peeks her head out and hollers for him to come in. And he says, I met some friends. Well, we begin to talk and we tell him a little bit about our story. The white columns on his house remind us so much of the home that we lost in a hurricane that held such special memories for our family. And before we know it, at the end of this conversation, he looks at us and he says, do you want to buy my house? Being a real estate agent, I knew that his house was not for sale. And I said, well, is it for sale? And he said, maybe in a year or so. My wife is not in great health. I'm not in great health. And it's on 6 acres and we can't take care of it anymore the way we used to. So we exchanged numbers. And I said, well, Mr. Larry, when you decide to sell your house, you give me a call. And that was on a Tuesday night. On Saturday, we got a call from a sweet lady who happens to be Mr. Larry's neighbor and his real estate agent. She said, Miss Norma, Larry's wife, woke up this morning with a broken hip. She's been taken by ambulance to the emergency room. And Larry called me and asked, could you find the young couple I met in the road and see if they want to come see my house? She said, do you want to come see the house? And I was like, sure. When? She said, tomorrow. He said, as long as you can look past all the medical equipment, tomorrow would be great. So the kids were still in town from college. And I said, okay, well, we'll come after church. So after church, unbeknownst to my children, because they had no idea we were looking at these other houses, I said, hey, we're going to go look at something. And I brought them out here. And when we walked through the doors, immediately, my kids were reminded that this was very much like the home we lost in Louisiana. They marveled at some of the woodwork being the same, the granite being the same, the tiles in the pool that was shaped just like the pool in Louisiana, the tiles and the shape were the same. We walked around really in awe of the fact that immediately it felt very much like home. We left that day and the tears began to fall again because I realized God was doing something that I had not asked for. I was actually quite content. We all were where we were living. God was doing something I didn't understand. I knew that it would be hard to leave neighbors and friends in a home we loved. But what I realized after visiting that house was that very first house we looked at, where I began to cry when the wind began to blow, is actually the back door neighbor. The church is where God was saying, come home. We sat down about a week later at a beautiful dining room table. He moved his wife's Bible and her Bible studies aside as he made an agreement with us that when she was better, they would find a one-story home and this would be our home. We left and it was dark, and I remember thinking, man, it is so dark out here. No streetlights. We're out in the country. We were a little bit in shock that we had just shaken hands and decided that one day, maybe that summer, maybe in a year, we would agree to move into this home. When we left, I looked at Scott at the stop sign, and he was, being the finance guy, a little blown away that he had just agreed to this. And I looked at him and said, "Do you think they deliver pizza?" And he goes, "Courtney, that's what you can think about? Do they deliver pizza out here?" And I was like, I don't know what to think. Our minds were in just a tizzy. So we're sitting at their stop sign, and there's a car approaching. And so we're waiting to see if the car is going to take a right onto our street or pass us. And as the car begins to approach, shortly after my question of, "Do you think they deliver pizza out here?" When the car approached, it was in fact a pizza delivery guy. Scott looked at me and he said, "Well, ask and you shall receive." And we began to laugh because we were like, okay, God's just showing off now. So we went home, still had not told anybody what was happening. Within a couple of weeks, we got a call. Mr. Larry's wife was not doing good. She wasn't going to be able to come home to this house because she was, in fact, going to have to come home in a wheelchair, and they needed something sooner. That was one story. The only way they could do that is if they had a contract on this house. We had not listed our house. We had not even taken pictures of our house. And so I agreed to write a contract. We wrote a contract on a Tuesday, thinking, okay, we have 10 days to try to make all of this happen and to just see if we can sell our house. On Tuesday, we agreed with written contract to buy this home. On Thursday, sadly, Miss Norma passed away. I never met her, but I know that she loved this house. But you know what I know more than that? Is she loved the Lord so much. It was evident. It was evident in her library of books. It was evident in her home. And it's evident in her husband, her marriage, and her children. She passed away on Thursday, and on Friday, we listed our home, and in 6 hours, we sold it. We sold it to a family with 6 children, whose husband's name is the same name as our oldest son. I knew immediately that was our family, and they were meant for that house. Didn't say it was easy, but we just continued to take one step as God was leading. 21 days later, we signed papers and we moved into a home that we did not plan for, we did not expect, and is immeasurably more than we could have ever dreamed of. It makes me emotional because it's just a house, and we have lost houses. So I'm not really tied to the physical building. But what makes me emotional is that in 2005, I remember sitting in front of a house where my children used to play, where joy and laughter flowed freely, and it was all stripped away by a natural disaster. It was broken to pieces, and as a family, we had to come together, strengthen our bond in our marriage and with our children. And we had to really figure out what's important. And what was important was that home was where we were. It was not where the walls were. We moved 12 times until we got home. Every time I drive into this house, I can't help but wonder, what are you doing, God? This house is not mine. This house is yours, and you have given it to me to be used to glorify you. He has done immeasurably more than we could ask or imagine. And my home is not my home. It is open to whoever wants to come and play with my farm animals, whoever wants to come visit Texas. I want to have Bible studies in this home. I want to open this home to mamas who need to cry or who need to talk. One day, I hope this home is filled with joy and laughter of grandchildren and friends' children. That's the goal. That's the plan. As far as the little church, I've established a relationship with the pastor of that church, and we've been in talks now since I moved in that one day we can restore that church. Because you see, sometimes on the exterior, things look broken, they look painful, but when Jesus enters the picture, the exterior changes because the interior changes. And that's the point of Masquerade of Motherhood. Listen, you may be wearing a mask of shame. You may be wearing a mask of anger, bitterness, fear, guilt, brokenness, self-sufficiency, the mask of am I enough and why do I feel overlooked? We all wear masks. And sometimes we feel like if we take those masks off, then our exterior is going to be ugly and nobody's going to want to have anything to do with us. And that, my friend, is a breeding ground of lies that the enemy wants you to believe. You can't unmask the story of that abuse. You can't unmask the story of that abortion. You can't unmask the story of that divorce. You can't take off the mask that appears to be beautiful to everybody. He wants you to believe that. And what God is saying is, remove the mask. Expose the mess, because I will do immeasurably more than you can think or imagine with your story. So I want to say thank you again. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your encouragement. 2 years and 100 episodes could not be possible if it weren't for those who were willing to be interviewed and it weren't for those who are willing to listen and to share it with their friends. I appreciate you, and I know that God has immeasurably more planned for the Mom Show. Let me pray for you. God, who could have ever thought, other than you, that you would bring a redemption story out of a lost house in a hurricane, that you could turn a girl with a crazy, chaotic past, and you could use it, that you could encourage me to unmask the pain and the masks that I was wearing, and you could use that to encourage other women to do the same. Who would have thought, other than you? God, I pray that our lives point to you, that our eyes stay focused on you, and that we recognize that we are each divinely appointed for a reason. I pray for the mama that's listening to understand that you, Lord, can, will, and want to do immeasurably more than we can imagine. So, Father, I want to thank you. Thank you for coming alongside this podcast. Thank you for leading me. Thank you for your creativity. Thank you for the women that have been interviewed. And thank you for the women that listen. To you be the glory and the honor. May we continue to be obedient to what you've called us to do, faithful to you, and willing to trust that you, in fact, will do immeasurably more than we could think or imagine. It's in your name we pray. Amen. If you want to print, screenshot, or share this week's verse, head to the show notes where you're going to find a link to my website and a graphic for you to use. Thanks so much for listening to Masquerade of Motherhood with Courtney Doyle. We want to be sure this blesses you and other mothers. And in order to do this, first, you must subscribe. This way you won't ever miss an episode. Also, if you'll rate and review this podcast on iTunes or wherever you're listening, this will increase our reach to other mothers who need a little encouragement, a community, and a whole lot of Jesus. We're so glad you're here.